We are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Gerri Haynes and Laura Hart. Gerri Haynes and Laura Hart are both with Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. They are both past presidents of WPSR, and they are in to talk about their recent trip to Gaza. Gerri and Laura, thank you both very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
So start out, tell us when and what was your motivation for going to Gaza?
We had decided early in the fall, late summer, that we would go into Gaza and see some friends. We've taken now 5 medical service delegations into Gaza since the end of Cast Lead in 2009. And we are planning on another medical service delegation in April of 2013. So we wanted to see what we could do to make that delegation more focused and purposeful.
All right. So, and you just recently got back like a week and a half ago, too?
Right. So then what happened was the Pillar of Cloud war attack on Gaza. Gaza, as you know, is an open-air prison. And out of that open-air prison, some of the people in Gaza have been able to get rockets and shoot those rockets into southern Israel, terrifying the people in Sderot and Ashdod. And so in November, Israel once again lodged a war on Gaza, and that war lasted for 8 days, and probably 174 to 180 people were killed, and well over 1,000 were wounded. If we could have, we'd have gone in during that war, but our permission was for the 28th of November, so we went in on the 28th of November.
It was a challenging time considering going in during the war, and both Gerri and I hoped to be there then, and we're both grateful that there was a ceasefire and there was not a land invasion of Gaza. It was at the same time exciting to be able to see our friends again, and really sad to walk once again through this very long walkway after we cross at Eretz, which is on the Israeli northern Gaza border, and to see that there were people in areas where we hadn't noticed them so much before, in what's called the no-go zone. To realize by the end of our 4 days there that although that area was now apparently open and available for farmers to return to their land, there were still farmers and people being shot in that no-go zone that was now a go zone.
While we were there, a young man was shot, and we visited him in one of the hospitals. Just sort of by coincidence, we were able to go into a hospital to see some of the physicians that we had met previously, and they took us to the room where a young man had been shot near the border in the agricultural zone area. Prior to the truce, 1/3 of the arable land in Gaza was into what was called the no-go zone, so that many farmers were unable to raise the crops that they were dependent for their living, depended on for their living. And now supposedly that area is open, but if it's a little unclear about how close to the border a person is able to stray. So at least 6, I think maybe as many as 8 people have been shot and killed in that no-go zone since the truce. The truce, while it has ended the bombing, has not ended the killing in Gaza. We know that the sea border was extended from 3 nautical miles to 6 nautical miles, but a number of boats have been destroyed and people killed on the sea as well. I don't know that number, so I apologize for that. But going into Gaza this time, the population was universally traumatized. You know, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder in this country. In Gaza, there is no post to their traumatic stress. The suffer from what we call continuous traumatic stress injury. Children always thinking that they may be bombed. Families always knowing that they're not able to protect their children. We had a very interesting meeting with some of the staff of Gaza Community Mental Health and with the guy who started Gaza Community Mental Health, and they are thinking and planning for a survey of children, how they cope in Gaza and the alienation that they are feeling from the people who are supposed to be their protectors, their parents, because children in that situation become more and more alienated when no one can protect them.
So talk more about what you saw in Gaza. You have been there multiple times before. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I started going there in 1993. So I don't know how many times I've been in Gaza, but I've been in the Middle East once or twice or 3 times a year since January 1993, and many times in Gaza. And as I said, we have taken these 5 medical service trips into Gaza since 2009, after Cast Lead.
And it's a very densely populated area.
Absolutely. It's as densely populated as Monaco or Macau or Hong Kong. So this piece of land that's probably half the distance to Tacoma is filled with 1.7 million human beings. You can't go anywhere without being surrounded with people and animals.
And my understanding was that the Israelis dropped leaflets telling people to get out,
Yeah.
or they would be harmed.
Yes, a good friend of mine mentioned that the Israelis who are leafleting, telling people to evacuate specific areas. The leaflets, of course, drift, and so people don't know exactly where it is that they're supposed to evacuate. And then in a population that is as densely populated, and in part of it, Jabalia camp, more densely populated than anywhere else on Earth, it's hard to know where to escape to. There really were no specifically safe areas. Laura and I were toured around Gaza City, primarily Gaza City, and the little bit of outlying area, and we saw specifically targeted buildings, and we saw places that had been destroyed in association with those targeted buildings. And the number of people that were injured sort of on the periphery, the collateral damage, if you will, or those are big numbers. We met with a physician that Laura knew at Al Auda Hospital, and you want to talk about him and his deafness?
Yes, this is a gentleman I've worked with in the past, and he was in his car leaving the hospital area. He was there late, and the car next to him was targeted, meaning it was hit by a missile or bomb, and he is now deaf from that explosion.
Right.
And realizes that he narrowly escaped having a more significant injury to himself. I think the thing that really struck me on this visit, on the tour we took, was not only the destruction of the buildings. That's very prominent when you first see that, and because we're coming several days after the immediate attack, we don't see flesh, we don't see blood. But the image of 2 cars that were so crushed and burned by the bombs that assaulted them, and the pictures of the 2 boys, young men, that were killed in those cars, and their mother goes out to that car every day to have some kind of connection with her sons. It's really an image that I carry with me.
So the leafleting didn't, in answer again to that question, Mike, the leafleting is almost an additional torture because there's no place to go. There's no place to know that you will be safe. A lot of these people live in incredibly densely packed apartment buildings. Now, given that we do have a picture of one multi-story building where the building itself is fully intact except for one apartment on the upper reach of the building, which was completely destroyed by a through-and-through missile. So there was discrete targeting as well as collateral damage. I hate that phrase, collateral damage. Those are real people and their real dreams and their real livelihood. And the death of 48 children in an 8-day period whose families are fully destroyed by their grief.
And in addition to people not knowing where they could possibly go that's safe, even if they did know, my understanding is that their movement is totally restricted by the IDF. Is that true?
Well, their external movement is restricted. They can go inside Gaza, they're free to move. But, Gaza is the length of Lake Washington. And so it's not a big area for 1.7 million people. It's 5 to 7 miles wide and 25 miles long. And the sea border is not a place we can go. The sea is very much polluted by the drainage of raw and partially untreated sewage because the people of Gaza have been prohibited from rebuilding their sewage treatment plants because during this siege, which is now ongoing for many years, they've been prohibited from having adequate building supplies coming in. They're now getting building supplies through those tunnels from Egypt, but the building supplies are of questionable quality and very expensive.
And you had mentioned earlier about the 1/3 of the arable land,
right,
was off limits to the farmers and their livelihoods, but the people of Gaza also, people of Palestine also depend on those farmers too, since food is not being allowed in at any reasonable rate into Palestine and Gaza.
Well, got into the area of Gaza, they're bringing food in through the tunnels, but when Israel left Gaza in 2005, they left a whole lot of standing greenhouses that, the rumor was they had been destroyed, but in fact they have not been destroyed. The greenhouses are there. Most of them are empty, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Israel has prohibited the export of services and goods and crop produce from Gaza. So growing things for no ability to export means that it's sort of growing things that they can't gain money from, as well as the water is reported by the United Nations to be 90 to 95% polluted. And so we know that, for instance, their citrus crop in the main died off because the soil was so full of salt. The problems of public health in Gaza are huge and multi-layered and will take generations to repair. Water treatment, sewage treatment, air quality, the burning of lead in their generators because they can't get unleaded fuel in sufficient quantities from Israel. The litany of public health concerns and disasters is long and deep.
The power is still of concern. The hospitals have backup generators, but private homes often have let go of their generators because if they had them, they're dangerous. We met with a woman who had almost died because she was adjusting a cable in her generator and was electrocuted. And we saw evidence of that on her hand. She told us that many people are saying it's better to work with a battery-operated flashlight or lantern than risk the generators. Imagine, though, that the power goes off 8 hours of every day at least. It's not timed with the daylight hours, which would be convenient. It's relatively scheduled, but often in the evening, so your kids are doing their homework by torchlight.
You were both there when the UN had the recent vote on recognition of Palestine. Can you talk about that? What was the reaction there?
It was a lot of excitement. I know that many people think there's a huge division between the people in Gaza and the people in the West Bank. Both of those geographic regions are part of Palestine. And I wasn't sure what to expect. We heard loud honking in the street. It was close to midnight their time, or when the news came out. Lots of honking and joyous honking and shouting, gunshots into the air, not targeted at any individuals. It was an expression of joy with the idea of being recognized. When you mention that, this trip more than any, I haven't been to Gaza as many times as Gerri, but I've been there 7 times, and to see and speak with young, highly educated people who are so tortured by being trapped, in a sense, especially young men. They can't leave. They don't have a state. They could apply to get a visa anywhere. They would move anywhere if they possibly could, to have the opportunity to work, to live, and yet they really can't. Occasionally a young woman may have someone sponsor her, but the visa is still a challenge for any individual. So this non-member status, I believe, was seen as a very positive step in not unlocking the door. Some kind of acknowledgement, though, of their humanity.
There was a lot of joy in that, and some confusion about what that will mean long term for them to be redesignated in their status. But I agree, the people of Gaza that we have met with have a feeling of being imprisoned and unable to move about. At the same time, many people who leave temporarily come back because Gaza is their home, and they miss the sense of unified community that exists in Gaza and that they find nowhere else in the world. Young people who go out for education and then look around the world and think, I miss my Gaza family, and come back. And people who want to come back and make things better, that life can be improved in Gaza if they come. When we left Gaza, we went into the West Bank and spent a couple of days there and drove around. We went into Bethlehem to stay and drove around that area of the West Bank, and were once again, I think, stunned by the growth just in this year of the settlements around Jerusalem, and how strong that ring is around Jerusalem of settlements built on occupied land. And the redesignation of those settlements on occupied land as being legal rather than illegal, and what that signifies for the Palestinians and their hope for a two-state solution to the ongoing problem. That in reality, on the ground, between the tunnels and the tunnels that connect the roads together, and the walls, and the confiscation of land, and the building of settlements, there is precious little contiguous Palestinian land left in the West Bank. So the problem of what will happen with a Palestinian state becomes an incredible question mark.
And those settlements being designated legal by Israel, right? The UN does not recognize those.
No, by Israel. And it's just in this year redesignated as, and publicly announced as not being illegal, but in fact being a part of Israel.
Gerri, isn't Bethlehem just about 8 miles as the crow flies from Jerusalem?
5.
Or 5.
Yeah.
And many of our friends in Bethlehem don't have permission to go to Jerusalem. They can go to other West Bank cities, but they no longer have permission from the Israeli government to go into Jerusalem, to go to holy sites that are significant to them, whether they be Christian or Muslim. As a child growing up and having this image of the manger, whether it was in a vacant place, a field. And of course, over time, places grow and expand. If you can imagine, and if those trying to get a picture, imagine that is not so. There's a wall entirely around Bethlehem. So if you were visioning that creche and the baby Jesus, you don't see that. All you see is a wall. And for those people living in Bethlehem, to those who do have permission to leave, to get to work, they're crowded every morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning, go through security every day to go to their job 3 miles away.
So we'll plan to go back in April with another medical delegation. I think we have a clear idea of what specialty areas we would like to bring. You know, Laura's husband, Rich Grady, is a pediatric urologist, and he's been on your program before to talk about the work that he has found to do in Gaza. And he plans to go back with us again in April. And we're looking for an ophthalmologist, and we're looking for a plastic surgeon, and hopefully we'll have an orthopedist who will go with us. But now they have a lot of trauma injuries that will need some special care. And so we're hoping to find physicians who are willing to go with us. And so we're seeking people to help us in this work.
And these people would do actual work while they're there, or would they train, or both?
Probably both. Laura, you can talk about that.
One of the things we've been doing over the past 5 trips is working with several physicians, training them so that we're not coming in and doing lots and lots of the same kind of case. We are teaching people, expanding on what they already know. People are hungry for knowledge, unlike physicians here who can go away to a medical meeting. The only way that they can have any kind of expansion of continuing medical education is by a webinar. Now imagine if your power's out and you're trying to do that studying in the evening. So it's not easy to keep up with current trends, and very, very few physicians are able to leave the country. So it's exciting to see their enthusiasm. My husband and I have both done a lot of other volunteer trips in many other parts of the world. And I would say that our experience in Gaza is by far very different in terms of the excitement of everyone to be present and just, they're hungry. They're just so hungry. I can't say that enough. The number of people crowding around to see a new surgical technique or hear something is remarkable.
And you could say that some of these people could go out through Egypt and get further training, but the need in Gaza is so great for them to be present and take care of the population that there are a number of things besides the cost of leaving, the financial cost of leaving. There is the social cost of leaving their practices and with nobody else to back them up. So people stay and people work, and they want more education and they want more help. And so the few people that we're able to take in, we understand we are few in number, but going back again and again begins to say to these people in Gaza that they are not forgotten. It's so easy to feel forgotten. You know, in our press, we raised this big flag about Gaza and the attacks on Gaza, or what was euphemistically called the war in Gaza. And then a week later, the truce is signed, and Gaza disappears from the headlines and from our minds, and yet the people in Gaza continue to live in this prison that is constructed by external power and that you and I help pay for.
And both their lives and their homes and places they go to school, hospitals are still destroyed from these attacks.
And their friends and their beloveds, their children, their parents, their brothers, their sisters. The trauma, as we know right now, post this shooting yesterday, the trauma of people being shot and killed resonates through a whole community. And because it is not a threat that is ever removed in Gaza, it's a constant trauma.
Gerri mentioned earlier that in meeting with some of the psychiatrists, the child psychiatrists, they were talking about a societal shift in a sense that there are so many children who've now lived through 2 major assaults that they're not trusting their parents. And what does that portend for the future? If a 5-year-old no longer trusts mom or dad to keep them safe, and there's a whole generation of children in that setting, it's concerning or alarming.
And again, as you just pointed out, the U.S. Has a direct role in what's happening there.
Right. Yeah. Well, the United States provides weapons to Israel and, financial support to Israel. And I'm not speaking against a relationship. I'm speaking about our lack of consciousness as a nation about what it is that we pay for and how responsible we are for what happens with our tax dollars. And our tax dollars have so overwhelmingly gone to a war effort, not Gaza specifically, but Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan. And we have robbed ourselves of our own infrastructure support by putting our tax dollars into private contractors and just the sort of corporate war machine. And so what I come away from Gaza with every time is how, as citizens of the United States, we need to be more aware of what we're paying for.
We are talking with Gerri Haynes and Laura Hart. They are both with Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. And how can people find out more about your upcoming medical delegation and how they can support that or get involved?
I would invite anyone to email me. And do you want me to give that email address
That would be
here?
fine, if you like.
Okay. It's iggydog, IGGYDOG @AOL.com. Or you're welcome to email Physicians for Social Responsibility, but probably the most efficient way would be to email me at iggydog@AOL.com.
All right. And Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility has a website as well, WPSR.org.
It does.
Is that right?
That's right.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you both very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Pleasure.
Mike, thank you for continuously letting us come and tell this story. Let me say one more quick thing. We have really good friends in Israel, and I always want to leave this awareness that in Israel, there are hundreds of thousands of people seeking to break this problem of the control of another people and who want to serve the cause of peace and justice. So let us not leave you with the idea that we're not aware that thrust also happens in Israel.